I'm still talking in general. I'm updating what I threatened to talk about last week of control, power, and conspiracy, and rebellion. Those four things, those three things, those four things. And I got a chance here, just barely, to look through some of the notes, and I see that, at least here, as far as I could glance, none of you actually choked to death over last week. And I'm going to say something to you people getting this on tape at some other time and some other place. Since we started taping these, I have periodically, and to varying degrees, tried to take into consideration that I was speaking to some other time and some other place. That somebody might be seeing this years from now, that somebody might be seeing this that had not seen anything before this particular tape. And I keep trying to back up, and I keep trying to give certain warnings, and I keep trying to tie some of this together, and I must tell you it is ultimately, in case none of you have guessed it, is ultimately futile. Because for one thing, what I'm saying has to take into account right now, and what I can feel in life, and what seems appropriate for me to say, and the kinds of maps I'm drawing. Anyone who might see this tape as their intro to me doing whatever this is, you're just going to have to do the best you can. I cannot, I repeat, ultimately take into consideration other times and other places. It would be nice, and on the surface it seems as though it would be nice and appropriate, since we have this equipment here to video and audio tape me for prosperity. Okay, posterity. But it is, at the extreme, it is moot, and it cannot really be done. So everyone take your best holt on what's happening. I'm going to pick back up talking about conspiratorial theories. But I will remind you here and now, and at some other time and some other place on tape, that I am not talking about ordinary conspiratorial theories. But now let me point out, even though I may sound like I'm talking about it, that the prime 3D support for conspiratorial theories is very important once you begin to see it. And that is that ordinary consciousness has the suspicion that behind the visible actors there are unseen forces. And of course, that's a fact. Except it's not a fact as ordinary consciousness would have it. But as I pointed out to you last week, the idea of conspiratorial plots running through mankind's history, or in fact, at the other extreme, running mankind, are omnipresent in the history of man. Now, when it gets to the crudest mechanical level, such as people believing that there is a secret band of bankers somewhere that's running the whole world, causing all wars, causing all depressions, then pulling certain areas of the country or the world out of depression, putting them back on the road to success, and that they constantly are making money off of this. It's not that there is not any reality to that, but insofar as that being of some importance, of that being a physical reality as simplistically as they would have it, is nonsense, I got to tell you. Well, it's not nonsense. I should be more specific. It's as real as the Christian God. It's as real as the Jewish Jehovah. It's as real as the Muslims' Allah. It's that real. But that is not what we're talking about, and it is not that simplistic. But it is not absolute insanity. To jump real far afield right quick, you would be as well off to go back to religion as to believe in the books that are available with such titles as I was seduced by alien creatures, or my posture was ruined when I was taken above aboard a UFO. It is not that that's complete insanity, other than the fact that it's complete insanity if it gets written down in a book. It's a reflection of something. And all of these beliefs in conspiratorial theories and some secret group controlling the affairs of mankind for their own selfish benefit. It's true, but not like ordinary consciousness believes. And what is missed is the first message. That is that consciousness all throughout the body of life, throughout humanity, has this suspicion, whether it gets verbalized or not. And by suspicion, I'm being charitable. I'm understating it. That what appears to be going on, the actors in the history of man, the actors in the instant affairs of man, may only be the visible part, and there's this deep suspicion that may never get verbalized in any particular individual, that there is something else going on behind this. There is the three-dimensional prime support for the conspiratorial theories. Now, a few of the things that I skimmed over last week, I want to mention a little more. Starting again as the basis, the ordinary three-dimensional conspiratorial type theories of some secret group, some group that is not visible, having some great effect, plotting and affecting the affairs of man. There's a whole lot of aspects I could bring out, but I'm going to stop sooner or later here and go on to rebellion. But one of them I mentioned last week, one aspect, one area, is in these kind of conspiratorial theories, for me to lump a bunch of them together and come up with a kind of common denominator in this one area, is that the theories say that this secret group, the conspirators, whoever they're supposed to be, that in one particular corner of the theory, the suspicion, is how the conspiracy operates, how it stays conspiratorial. That is, conspiratorial in the real definition is primarily or usually a secret combining affair of more than one person. A plot done in secret. But then part of what they must do, the way it must operate when it gets into the normal affairs of man is the conspiratorial, or the conspirators must conceal their own real interest. They must misdirect those being conspired against, that is, everybody else. And then ultimately, they've got to deny, of course indirectly is the way to do it, they've got to deny that they exist. Jumping back and forth between the common mechanical silly belief and what I'm trying to get you to look at is, if this was true, if there was this secret group of greedy old men, these people from another planet that came down here as DNA on a meteor a million years ago, whatever it is, actual offsprings from Jesus, if they did operate, if there was such a simplistic group of conspirators, you've got to see that there'd be some validity in the beliefs that I just mentioned. For them to operate, you would have to conceal what your true interests were. All right, it would seem obvious to you if you're going to do even fifth column work in the midst of your opponents, in the midst of a neighboring tribe. You would have to operate optimally, you would have to conceal your own interest. And you would need to continually misdirect those that you are attempting to conspire against, the powerless in this case. Because the conspiratorial theories, of course, are, at least tacitly, also dividing humanity up into the powerful and the powerless. And the conspirators are the ones with the power. And then the rest of us poor schmucks, we get conspired against. We get used, we get pushed about. But they would have to operate most efficiently, conceal their own interest. They would have to misdirect our attention, the powerless, so we're always looking somewhere else. And then to really put the frosting on the cake, to put the feather on the condom, they would have to, or they would want to, even deny that they exist. They would put out the kind of information, the stories. They would support, if not put out the stories, that conspiratorial theories are just so much hogwash, and just laugh at them. They would be the ones writing the stories laughing at it, that sort of thing. All right, now let's jump the great secret crack that might break your own back. How familiar to a few people does this ring of life's overall use of man? Forget about the bankers, forget about human people. Look, think back to all the so-called religious, philosophical whinings, theories, poetry of humanity, including your own. Does it not, can you not hear the same kind of note being sounded if there was a conspiracy like this, that life would be doing the same thing in its use of man, assuming it has interests that are not exactly yours in this conspiracy? And forget these old men or this group of bankers somewhere. Life itself, it conceals its interest. What else is the basis of three-dimensional philosophy? It's asking, what is the meaning of life? So life is covered it there. It's concealed its interest because no human, no ordinary human consciousness perceives it. If you go into religion, all religions say one of the things they have in common throughout the planet, throughout the body of life, throughout the time of the body of life, is that man cannot know God's ultimate plan. It's just impossible. So there you are. It misdirects humanity. That should be just evident as hell, but I'll go ahead and point it out. If it did not, then everybody knows the answer to everything. But as it is, at the ordinary level, nobody knows the answer to nothing. Of course, you can say, all right, humanity has yet to wise up, or humanity is not smart enough, but we've got now what? At least in the West, a spotty 3,000 years worth of recorded history. And as I've asked you the musical and rhetorical question before, can you see that consciousness in general, forget technology, forget the overall development of humanity, but consciousness in general, right now, ordinary consciousness, understands no more of the, quote, eternal questions than it did in Grecian times? To pick that as sort of a accepted beginning flowering of Western philosophy. People are asking the same questions, and they believe that the answers are no more forthcoming. Is that not misdirection? And of course then, the third area of this one aspect I was using as a parallel between ordinary belief in conspiratorial theories and a parallel with life itself is for the conspirators to finally deny their own existence. Life does that almost in every pore of its body. It comes out in human consciousness as everything from influence of the planets to the good old standbys of gods and anti-gods, subconscious traumas, fate. It comes out as almost everything, except anything that is a satisfying reply. So why would an intelligent man, my kind of intelligent man or woman, worry about conspiratorial theories on this planet, or being based on this planet, having a mortal source? Life itself fits that and some others that I may or may not ever go into, but other general aspects of the three-dimensional belief in conspiratorial theories. There it is, life itself. It meets every requirement. Once you see it, it would make the idea of some mortal band of conspirators to make them look like children, which they would be, because they would be as conspired against, ultimately, as you are, if there was a group. If you can refine any glimpse you get in the general direction of which I am speaking, not only could you see a kind of parallel between these so-called conspiratorial theories and what I'm saying about life's general use of man, you could also see it, if you could refine it down a little bit lower, as like a lesser reflection of your own individual inner life. Can you not? Can you find no parallel between that and what seems to be the eternal dialogue within you? The continual ambivalence of this partnership. You can't find any of these same dynamics at work? That's something just in you personally now, individually. That there seems to be something going on, but you could, once I point out that you could truly believe that there is some force or forces behind even what's going on in you that have interests they're concealing. How else do you explain the fact that everybody on this planet believes that they do things that are not in their own interest? Now, forget all these explanations about the devil made me do it or my childhood traumas. Just accept the salient fact by humanity's own definition that we all do things that are not in our own interest. We all have some piece of self-destruct in us. All right, why us and not possums, foxes, flying squirrels? Why us? The crown of creation. Why us? All right, there you are. If there is a conspiracy going on, the conspirators have their own interests which they must conceal. How else do you explain that you and everyone else would do things that you admit freely are against your own best interest, health-wise, feeling-wise, emotional-wise, financial-wise, any-wise? How else can you explain that you would do it? A conspiracy. But forget about bankers, little gnomes down in the vaults in Bern or Zurich. How about little gnomes down in your own vault somewhere? And they're concealing their interest. Don't worry about looking for a conspiracy somewhere else. Now about the other aspect, they must misdirect your attention. Is that not true of ordinary consciousness? If your attention was properly directed, surely there'd be some sort of ordinary progress going on in the last 3,000 years. Or if not then, in the last 10 or 15 years inside of you. But in ordinary people, ordinary consciousness, there's always the feeling that I'm looking in the wrong place maybe. I believe I'm trying to figure this out. Now, I try to have a great thought, and I'll pick up a little paperback on Plato, and I'll start to read it, and suddenly I'll remember that moonlighting's on TV tonight, or there's a new James Bond movie playing down the street. Or I went to sleep. There was a noise outside, and I ended up sitting out on the back porch, drinking a beer, and looking at the sky. I seem to continually get misdirected. And of course, the other aspect of the conspirators must ultimately, when they're operating most efficiently, deny their own existence. All right, if there's a conspiracy in you, have you ever heard about it? Never. I'm the first person that ever brought it up. Could we go out and tell ordinary people, did you understand, have you ever heard about conspiratorial theories? And they might say, yeah. You know, I believe that there's a right-wing conspiracy that assassinated President Kennedy. I believe there is a banking conspiracy that caused the American Depression back in the 30s. You say, well, all right, never mind all that. How about, what if I told you there's a conspiracy inside of you? You know what would happen? Or if I caught you before I gave you any preface to this, or if I jumped out of the bushes with a mask on, you didn't know it was me, and I said, there's a conspiracy inside of you. You and the partnership would run through all the systems and go, good grief, there's no conspiracy here. Maybe a little ignorance, maybe a little dumbness, maybe a little laziness, but there's no conspiracy in here. That is the ultimate conspiracy, if there is one. is the conspirators must deny their own existence. And by deny their own existence, of course, I am inferring that they succeed at it. Some other aspects from last week into this week into next week. If you recall, I was talking about some of the fragmentation. If there was some kind of conspiracy, they would also control the way those conspired against, that is, the powerless, get information. Ultimately, whoever is defining reality is in control. But the information, now by information, whether I keep doing this for the next 10 or 15 minutes or not, but you can just look at it as information / news / reporting / consciousness. It's all the same thing. It's according to what parallel or what ephemeral way I may be speaking paradigmatically. But all of that seems to be information, knowledge, stories, consciousness of out there, of reality, that ordinary awareness is receiving. Now, at the ordinary level, you should begin to look, and it's easy to see that you are getting general reality fed in fragments. It cannot be diverse enough to ever offer to ordinary consciousness any sort of general picture of a continuing seamless reality. If that was possible, you would be disturbing. Here I can go through another series. The status quo / the conspirators / the steady growth dynamic / the stability of life's expansion. If there was any real choice in the kind of information that's received, if there indeed was a pluralistic buffet of information, of energy, what you'd be setting up at the 3D level would be the possibility of mutation taking place in life, in life's place, in life's body, in humanity's area, in life's body. So I remind you again, one of the things I was mentioning last week, there has to be the impression in ordinary consciousness, whether it be here or whether it be in what you would consider to be the anathema of our kind of horizontal situation politically. For instance, right now, I guess you would say Russia, just as an easy example. That compared to such an area of life's body, we have a pluralistic source of information. That our concept of reality is much better than theirs, because we've all heard how their news is slanted, how the news is controlled by the government. It's no secret, and they only get the news that the government wants them to have. Whereas here, it's a completely different ballgame, because we even have newspapers that attack the government. We have newspapers that attack other newspapers. We have newspapers that are published by the right, newspapers published by the left. It is all about the same information. It is all fragmented, and it never disturbs the status quo. Never. If it apparently had the germ to be disruptive, you must see the obvious. If it has that germ, it's going to be a teeny-weeny germ, it's going to be a teeny-weeny paper, and it's going to have a teeny-weeny audience. And that gets close to a period, as opposed to your ordinary consciousness saying, yeah, but it could grow. Now, if you're going to say that, you could say that ultimately ducks may learn to tap dance after all. There is not extant anywhere on this planet true pluralism of information. There simply is not. I mean, it fits right in with the conspiratorial theories. And one way that it's controlled by, let's assume just for a few more seconds, the possibility of conspirators somewhere. There's got to be something behind this, right? I mean, if it's true what I'm pointing out to you, if it's true that there is no pluralism of information, reports of reality, that it's just a kind of illusion, trompe-l'oeil, a trick to the eye. If that be true, then it's got to be the act of some group, right? It cannot be these little pretty faces of Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, the known pictures that are publishers of the New York Times. Nah. They don't have the power. They don't own these outlets for information. It's back to the conspirators. Somebody in secret. There are faces and forces behind the visible, right? And they have got to give the illusion. It's misdirection. It helps deny their own existence. The illusion that there's some sort of freedom to pick and choose information. But remember, information, stories, reporting, I went through a whole series of slashes. Also within that is reality. One way to keep it in this condition, if there was a conspiracy, would be to fragment the news. It just so happens that there is a physical parallel to this that I'll point out to you. The physical layout of magazines and newspapers. That is, the story starts, and then it says, turn to page 12. And you have to turn the page, going through other stories, passing advertisements, to get over to the completion of the story. Or television. Coming up is going to be a report on such and such right after these commercials. The layout of everything in life is such that if you're going to follow me right quick just in the 3D world, that everything is already fragmented. You cannot, you pick up the paper, the headlines for the day, the most important story for the last 24 hours, and you start reading it, you get down, it's getting good, or it looks like it's getting important, and it's going to point out ramifications this may have in the great or immediate future. And it says turn to page 12. You have to turn to page 12. Other things catch your eye, and you may stop and read an ad for a shoe sale. And you may see something about porno wars start in Cleveland. So you glance some of that, and then you finally, what was I? Oh, the important story. And you look over. Fragmented. And you never knew it was a plot, did you? You thought there was some reason that the stories, they try to get as many on the front page as they can, and so therefore they got to put them somewhere in the back. Or in magazines, why do I have to keep turning the page? Well, they try to get all the stories where they start up here in the front, and if they're going to trail off, then somewhere along the line, some layout artist somewhere, or whoever's in charge of the makeup of the magazine goes, well, we only got this much left, and we can't get on the pages where it started. Just stick it in the back, put container over there. Yeah. Now that I brought it out, aren't you glad? Can't you smell conspiracy somewhere? That it fragments all the stories. It fragments the reports today of reality. The reflection, if one calls the other, if one was a reflection of the other, or vice versa. Do you not see a beautiful potential parallel between that and the way consciousness acts now? The fragmentation. If there was a conspiracy, they would have to be controlling. If they were going to operate as efficiently as the ordinary conspiratorial theorists believe, they would be already, after all these years, thousands of years of experience, they would be operating at an increasing degree of efficiency. And so I'm telling you that they would, in the beginning, immediately have gone after the ways, the means of reporting. Whether it be writing on stone, they would have been right there with Moses somewhere. When he was up on the mountain, forget God, the little band of conspirators were up there. And they'd have set him down and said, son, we like your looks, like the cut of your jib. And he could have said, well, that's what circumcision will do for you. And they just said, we're going to make something out of you. You got these people following you. How do you like it thus far? And he says, I like the whole feeling. I like it. And they said, but you're running out of material, aren't you? He said, well, you're right. And he came down and said, God wrote this stuff in stone. If there's any basis to the conspiratorial theories, I'm just picking that as one possible starting place in history, horizontal history. The conspirators were up there in the clouds on that mountain, not God, and they wrote that. And he thought, well, wait a minute, I'm going to have to shout power, you guys. And they said, no, you don't even mention it. You go down, you just tell them that the spirits or somebody did it. You take credit. You and whoever, you say God did it. But no, don't mention us. No problem. Because the powerful can apparently always share power with the powerless. Because you're a wage earner. You can be fired tomorrow. So they would have, in the very beginning, started controlling what appears to be the physical, the material reporting, the passing of energy that seems to be a detailing of what's going on out there outside the consciousness of the individual. That's the first thing they would have done. And so by now, trust me, if there was such a thing, after 3,500 years, believe me, their tentacles, they've got everything. Everything from the obvious of the New York Times, to Time Magazine, to Playboy, Harper's Bazaar. They got it all. If there is such a group, you can trust me. They have got to. That's the most efficient way, is to control what appears to be the retailing, the detailing of reality, and especially when it appears to be pluralistic, that there seems to be different versions of it. But besides having to give, to be most efficient, to give the impression that there are versions of it, that there are sundry choices as to what reports of reality you accept, beyond that, somewhat of a master stroke would also be that they would have to fragment the news, and the news equaling consciousness, and the consciousness equaling the news. So what's new? Why worry about conspiratorial reports and theories? I've given you people enough to do. You should have already been using your own laboratory up here to see the fragmented state of ordinary consciousness. Consciousness is continually turning the page and looking over stories that had no relationship to what you were apparently, to slice it up and start somewhere, that 2 minutes ago you were thinking about. A problem, something in your life, or worrying about a philosophical question. Consciousness is continuing, going off, thinking about something else, seeing a billboard, thinking about an advertisement. You are continually turning the page, and you're dealing with stories that are always continued on page 7. You're always dealing with reality at the ordinary level. So stay tuned, the next story could be very important to you right after these announcements. That is consciousness. That's not limited to the television. That's not limited to magazines and newspapers. That is consciousness. If there was a band of horizontal conspirators, they would be behind such an arrangement. There are other areas I could draw a parallel between ordinary, what appears to be ordinary reality. There is the sensation. It's increasing very fast, even in your lifetime. There is the sensation of constant reporting. We now have 2 major cable television networks running 24 hours a day, that other than their advertisements, all they're doing is continually reporting the news. In every city of any size nowadays, there's a 24-hour AM news radio station. That apparently the news is it. And there are people who now admit that they are news junkies. And there's satellites, now newspapers. USA Today is sent from, one time as one central reporting office, and maybe some satellites now, but it goes to an actual flying satellite and is bounced down to different printing plants around the country mechanically, automatically, and it bounces information off, and they print out that edition that's delivered to your house. There seems to be, there is the sensation, if not the absolute reality right now, but there is the sensation, of which you should be aware once I point it out, that there is a constant reporting going on. It is not like your mother's and Father's Day is far removed from your grandfather's day, that they might have gotten a paper once a week. Go back another generation, and many of you, the news they had, and that's not that long ago, remember, but the news they had could have been months old. That somebody came to town and told them, we elected a new president. When was it? It was 6 months ago. Your grandfather went, oh, really? Do you know his name? They said, well, I think his name was Harrison or Huddleston or something. You go, huh, well, that's interesting. And they went ahead and plowed up the field, and that was it. But now there appears to be constant reporting, and it now seems to be of some consequence. Of some consequence. But what is the consequence? Jumping back and forth between what would appear to be the external world of reporting and cable news networks and whatever else I may be inferring that would not be as obvious. This sensation of a constant reporting of the news specifically helps to keep it fragmented. And the basic aspect I mentioned just en passant last week is by this sensation of a constant reporting is it spoils and therefore fragments yesterday's news. By this sensation of constant reporting, the constant updating of the news, it renders yesterday's news. And by yesterday, of course, does not literally have to be 24 hours ago. It could have been 2 hours ago. But it renders yesterday's news, or it makes it seem to be dated, makes it apparently perishable, and the ultimate temporary sensation, and the temporary sensation continues to go like this. It seems to render yesterday's news irrelevant to what's going on now, and therefore you have again the fragmentation. So yesterday's news is gone. They're not even talking about Lebanon anymore. A year ago, Lebanon, 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 that's all you heard, and now you don't hear anything, or maybe once a week you may hear something about Lebanon now. But do you know that not the same thing is still going on over there, the same sorts of things, but it's not any longer reported? When consciousness is dealing with reality, excuse me, when the newspapers and the televisions are dealing with reality on a constant basis, and by being constantly reporting, that it makes yesterday's news seem perishable, outdated, and irrelevant. Because here's the now's headline. Here, glad you tuned in, ladies and gentlemen of America. Coming to you live from New York. This is the 7 o'clock network news live, and here's the lead story. And you ask somebody, and you say, wait a minute, I try to keep up with the news. And it gets to commercial, and you say, you watch the news every day. Yes, 7 o'clock news, it's right up to date. It's the only network now that comes on live at 7 o'clock. You say, all right, what was the lead story yesterday? Nobody knows. It appears to be unconnected to right now. It's dated, it's rotted, it's out of fashion. And it is ultimately, and all this happens without any sort of yellow systems analysis, but it is rendered irrelevant. And there, from one viewpoint, is the ultimate fragmentation of consciousness. I'm sorry, the news. That everything that went before is now irrelevant. There's no real connection. Or any connection you can come up with would be some sort of verbal theorization that would be just pedantic, to say the least, because what we're dealing with is today's story, the events right now. The world is going too fast, it's too complex to get tied up with yesterday's news when, since you asked me, you're right, I can't remember what it was. So therefore it cannot be of any importance. The great fragmentation bandit. Another slight aspect of this, so I can point out a parallel, is there's also the growing sensation and reality of global instantaneous reporting that is not your grandfather's day. That he found out Somebody just rode into town on a mule, and he overhears them talking, and he finds out that his country has a new president, and he asks when, and he finds out it was happened 6 months ago. But then the reality of the election to him is when? Right now? 6 months ago? If it's 6 months ago, how can you debate it? But now they're apparently, in an increasing degree, now affecting almost the entire world, is the impression, if not reality, of instantaneous reporting. That something happens even in a horizontal environment like Russia, of a nuclear accident, and they may even try to hide it. They did publicly denied it, so the stories go. Within a few hours, there were people in other areas of life's body that were saying, hey, something stinks over there in Russia. No matter what they say, something has happened. It's almost instantaneous reporting. Now, what does that do? It increasingly gives everyone the sensation of a shared reality. That gives everyone on this planet the increasing sensation that our reality, the Russians' reality, the Peruvians' reality, the Chinese reality, is just about the same. You don't think that's a masterstroke? Can you see that that is a continuing fragmentation of consciousness? I'm sorry, the news. That it continues to fragment it when it apparently is doing just the opposite. It apparently is willing to get into a more commonly shared global reporting network. But it does just the opposite, at least in the 3D world. It continues to fragment it. Now I'm going to start a little bit on rebellion and revolution. Still apparently using these kinds of external parallels of conspiratorial theories. And that which I pointed out to you last week of the two easily identifiable hereditary camps of the powerful in the horizontal world and the powerless. And that you can't move from one class to another. There is no doctor that can take the Cockney girl and turn her into My Fair Lady. There is no way to go in the horizontal world from being the powerless to the powerful. In the horizontal world. But in the horizontal world, and perhaps otherwise, there are continual historical manifestations of rebellion, attempted rebellion. Some aspects of rebellion, revolution, is wherever it is, whatever time and place it was, the voices behind the rebellion, the would-be revolution, in one way or the other, are always calling out, or crying out as their ultimate goal, the distinction, or the extinction of all distinction. That the purpose of our revolution is to distinguish the extinction between all economic classes, between all racial groups, between all religious persuasions, between the ultimate two camps, to eradicate the distinction between the powerful and the powerless. That, in one way or the other, is always the proclaimed goal of all would-be revolutions. But what is entailed in that? What they are calling for, in truth, is a deadly peace. What they're calling for is like someone living in a house next to the freight yards of life, and they're begging for one night of peace and quiet so I could sleep. That would be the extinction of all distinctions. They are unknowingly crying not for peace, but for a deadly peace. Now back to the conspiratorial theories. How common is the feeling, not just historically, but in you, of wanting change? Now, it may well be that there are a few inherently middle-class people that I have attracted here by accident, and you may say, I have never had a rebellious, or at least a revolutionary feeling in my body. I did not march back in the 60s. Some of you could say that you were 40 years old or 50 years old in the 60s, that you weren't in college, you were too busy making a living. You weren't interested in that sort of thing, that you have never felt the need to rebel against anything political or economic. Yeah. You felt the need to change, you wouldn't be here. Everybody feels as though they should be a part of some kind of rebellion. And it doesn't mean that you ever use the term. It does not mean that you march in the street with placards. There is the feeling of rebellion in everyone. It's just simply known as, to many people, it would be verbalized in them as the desire to grow, to better myself. Well, what do you call that? It is a low-level form of rebellion. It's I want to do better in life. Well, you damn smart aleck. Stay in your place. No, that's not what we're here for. Not what we're here for politically. I got the right to try and change my occupation, to move up in the social strata, get a better car, get a better hairpiece, be a better person. That's rebellion. And what you're doing by attempting to change is not dissimilar, I am going to suggest to you, to what I started out when you thought I was actually talking about rebellion and revolution. Is your desire individually to change is to begin to eradicate the distinctions between you and everybody else. As I want to be as rich as the Rockefellers. Pardon me, Cole Porter. I want to be as rich as the Guggenheims, the Mellons, the Cantaloupes. I want to be as pretty as Elizabeth Taylor, as handsome as Burt Reynolds, as verbose as Oral Roberts. You think that's change? It seems to be acceptable. That surely the gods would approve of us attempting to better ourselves. But when you're talking about change, and if you can express it, which every ordinary consciousness would have to in some specific example, what it is expressing unknowingly is, I want to eradicate the distinction between me and what I'm not. That is, me and somebody else that I can use as an example. I want to be as rich as them. I want to be as powerful as them, as handsome as them, etc. Another aspect of this, apparently all forms of rebellion, another way of putting what I was just talking about, that apparently the revolutions, I'm jumping back right quick again to what appears to be the external realities of revolutions. A redescribing of what I was previously referring to, the revolutions would say that in some way they're attempting to eradicate these distinctions, and they want to end all conflict. That we may have to go through conflict right here during this revolution, but our aim is to end all conflict and to stop us from being adversaries here in our community, here in our nation, that we should all be brothers and live in peace. This kind of revolution never occurs in life. As I pointed out from one viewpoint or one description, it would create a deadly peace. But what it would also do, if it did away with what apparently would be political or economic opponents, if you're doing away with opponents, you're doing away with all struggle. If you're doing away with all struggle, you're doing away with all growth. Therefore, no revolution ever succeeds. Put it another way, out in the external world now, all revolutions are simply a prelude to the next revolution. There is no end to it. They cannot reach what appears to be the satisfying conclusion. Now, all of you are well read enough in history, you should know that. One revolution begets another revolution. That's it. You take power away from one person forcibly, it's going to be taken away from you. You're a sitting duck. Do you see any parallel between that and what appears to be your personal, individual, private, internal life? You attempt to change, and what happens? The revolution never succeeds. There's never an end to the revolution. Well, I apparently took charge. For years, I'd been trying to quit, fill in a blank. Some habit you got. Some apparent quirk of your personality. For years, I tried to stop blanking. And now I have, and am I any better off? Not really. Has anything really changed? Are you now satisfied? Now, you may say, well, I'm glad I did it, but are you satisfied? Did that take care? Is the rebellion now over? Have the Sandinistas now pacified everyone? Have the Trotskyites put everyone at peace? Did the American Revolution calm all the diverse fears, angers, different apparent goals of these pluralistic hordes of people? Are you any more satisfied than you were? And yet there is the belief out there and in here that we're always on the verge of a rebellion, or we should be. That is change, self-improvement. But does the revolution ever succeed? Is there ever an end to it, which would be the success of a revolution? Another aspect, jumping back and forth from apparently out there to apparently in here, if you can jump. Well, we better turn the tape over. We will jump on the other side of the tape. Jumping some more between the two apparent possible aspects that I might be talking about. Who the hell knows? As far as rebellion. Another aspect of rebellion. Notice this. In your rebellion, speaking about you individually now, and if you were apparently part of an external group, but your rebellion is always one of patriots and the enlightened. Whereas the rebellion, the would-be rebellion, the revolution of anybody else is always a revolution of thugs and rogues. Always. We, in our desire to rebel, to create a revolution, are doing so for enlightened reasons. We are patriots. That the general scheme of the revolution is for the good of us all. But all you got to do is look across the street, look across the border, look at a conflicting, if we're talking about externally, political party, group of people, would-be revolutionaries. You do not find patriots over there. At the very least, they're mercenaries. And at the very worst, they're always a bunch of thugs and thieves. How strange that you cannot have two groups of enlightened, patriotic revolutionaries. Now, if we're trying to jump back and forth, your desire to change personally, to rebel, your desire to change, to be freer, is always good, admirable, Whereas the desire in other people to change, just individual people to change, to better themselves. What is it? Well, it ranges from, this is from your viewpoint, it ranges from being undeserved to being unnecessary. In general, it can be put in these terms: who cares? That somebody else tells you, I have taken up aerobics, I have gone on a diet, I am trying to cut back to 1 cigarette every hour. Who cares? You don't care. Nobody cares. But wait a minute, if you'll hush, let me tell you what I'm doing. I have given up, not cut down, I'm giving up salt. It's good. It's good that I do this. It's patriotic for me. It's good for me. I'm doing what is good. What you're doing individually, it's somewhere within the range of it's unwarranted, that is, it's unnecessary. To it, it's just undeserved. That is, you're not going to do it, you can't do it. Who you fooling? Or as I said, to wrap it all up, it really amounts to who cares? How can those kinds of counts, if we're jumping internally now and talking about individual people right quick instead of great groups of revolutionaries out there, how is it everyone's involved to some degree in an attempted revolution going on? I've taken up running. A lot of good it's going to do you. I decided to go back to school. I know why you're going back to school. You want to make more money. You're a thief. You're no good. Who cares? What you should try to do is straighten up your own untoward personality. And you're worried about making more money. If you knew what people thought of you, if you knew how all of us around you despised you. In other words, your rebellion is useless, at the very least. I didn't want to hear about it. Whereas my revolution, my feelings, my desire to rebel are based upon patriotic, enlightened attitudes. All you got to do is see the fragmented news to jump back outside right quick. You look at a country going on right now, 1987, the prime example, Nicaragua. It's reported from one part of the world that the group in power are the enlightened post-revolutionaries, and now the group trying to overthrow them, that is the new revolution, are mercenaries. They're thugs. They're remnants of the previous regime. They're now out of power and mad as hell. But then you go to another part of last body in this same situation, the same reporting, that is the reporting of the same circumstance, the same story, gives these present rebels names such as Contras. They're seen as these saviors from these revolutionaries who have proved to be tyrants. If there was a reality in the 3D world, if there was a stable reality, you would have to say, all right, they're reporting the same story. But from one view, in last body right now, Group A is the good guys and Group B is the bad guys. Group A is the powerful, Group B is the powerless. But all you got to do is shift over to another part in last body and look at the same situation if it was stable in the 3D world. And so right there is the same reality. But over here, it's reversed. And there are groups of people over here that say, yes, that is it. Now, all of you people have got to be good enough by now to transcend your own partnerships, saying of, hey, well, the news is distorted somewhere else. Whatever news we're getting is the right news. If you can entertain that from your partnership, then you didn't hear anything I talked about last week, and plus you heard even less tonight. You've already forgotten the possible reality of the conspirators. That there seems to be available a choice of views. There seems to be a freedom of choice. That, all right, I can believe what's written here in our newspapers, that from our viewpoint in Life's Planet, I understand what you were saying about the Nicaraguan situation. All right, our detailing of it has Group A as the good guys and Group B as the bad guys. Group A, the guys on our side. We approve of them. But now look, we jump to another part of the planet in Russia right now, and they call it something else. But that doesn't make it so. They're simply distorting the news. But plus it shows that there is freedom of choice, because they got the freedom to distort it, whereas we have the freedom to get the right story, right? If there are conspirators, ooh, they love you. The apparent pluralism of the reporting of the stories is all the same story, and wherever you are, if you were in Russia now, you would have no choice but to accept their story. If you're here, our story is correct. I must remind you, I will, this has got ultimately nothing whatsoever to do with politics, Nicaragua, Russia, the newspaper business. Nothing. They're just poor reflections of this. It's the kind of thing that the children talk about out on the schoolyard. You people are supposed to be, if not inside the building, you're supposed to be up on top. You should be ready to graduate from kindergarten. They're discussing what appears to be the reports of reality. But on the schoolyard, all you can see is eyeball level with dwarfs and midgets and little squirts and nippers. They're just poor reflections of this. It's the kind of thing that the children talk about out on the schoolyard. You people are supposed to be, if not inside the building, you're supposed to be up on top. You should be ready to graduate from kindergarten. They're discussing what appears to be the reports of reality. But on the schoolyard, all you can see is eyeball level with dwarfs and midgets and little squirts and nippers. Let me show you another aspect, or attempt to sketch you another aspect, that I would insist you would have to do with revolution, rebellion. There is a belief, an idea that has been expressed throughout history, apparently on large scales and then sometimes on little bitty scales. And there is, as always, or oftentimes at least, a great unrecognized truth and liberation to this idea. The idea is, I'll quote it, it's us, it's either us or them. Variation, it's us against them. This has been an idea that has ranged from a battle cry to just a silent feeling in an individual. That on some scale, it's us against them. If you understand, if you can begin to see part of the 4D loop behind this, it is a form of real potential liberation. You have got to first see it as being an impersonal, albeit personal, affair. That there is nothing to be gained immediately. There is nothing to be gained ultimately if you stay in the 3D consciousness of believing that there is an us against them. And even if there is, that there's anything that can be done about it. Then recognized liberation of which I speak, or a hint, would be that you understood that all of this was an internal, a personal, although impersonal affair. Now you could look at it, if you'll follow right quick, you could look at it as being a personal affair in two different directions in the 3D world, of internal and external. Now, us against them. The powerful against the powerless. Not I against I. Of course, ordinary people now. There would be revolutionaries in the ordinary world. It's the Christians believing they're against the Muslims. The Jews believing they're against the Christians somewhere in the world. One country against another country. One economic class against another class. But there is a feeling built into all consciousness that it's us against them. And that's what it comes down to. But look at it, try this right quick. Look at it first as being a kind of personal, albeit impersonal, us against them, in somewhat of an externally directed manner, thusly. Viz. is don't let them make you do what they want. A prime example I would suggest to you. They deliver hostility toward you, and what they want you to do is return it. And if you're going to understand what rebellion is, you're going to understand that there is a liberation in the correct understanding that indeed, at a personal, although impersonal level, it is us against them. Is that the apparently externally directed side of this is you've got to immediately, forthwith, forever, and in all directions, do not let them make you do what they want you to do. And I could stand here almost as long as I could talk and start giving you other examples. But I gave you one broad enough, is they are continually handing you hostility. And what they want you to do is to return it. Oh, I know there's some ordinary people that would want to take the blame for it and say, well, I've got a bad temper. I'm inclined to react to hostility because, well, you don't know the background of my childhood. You need to see that it's us against them. They made me do it. Remember that? All right? They're wanting to make me do it. They're always wanting to make me do it. It is a form of slavery. If you're going to be any sort of revolutionary, don't do what they want you to do. Never. That should be a tenet of any decent revolutionary. Look at it as enlightened spite. Something happened in life and you immediately want to cry about it. They want you to cry about it. Damn it, don't cry. They want you to holler when you get stuck. I'm not just being funny. I know it sounds funny and it can sound as though it's, to say the very least, I'm getting close to 5D parallels and parables. But whatever they want you to do is don't do it. As long as they can make you do what they want, there's no chance for rebellion. None. You got to see that. Even if they do something, and what you want to do is holler, I'm not going to put up with that crowd. All right? If you can't see very well, you'd say, well, wait a minute, that's rebellion right there. Because I told them, hey, don't do that to me. I don't like that. You're missing it. That's what they want you to do. Isn't that what you wanted to say? Yeah, well, that's what they want you to do, is don't do it. Like always, almost everybody can miss this if they want to. Something happens, and I think in my heart of hearts, or I may say outright, because I'll tell you the sort I am. I don't mind identifying myself. There's just so much of this kind of crap I'll take. And when they do that, I'll stand up. I may not be able to change things, but by God, I'll stand up to the forces. I'll stand up to the state, the local community, the temporary morals of my society. I'll stand up and say, hey, I don't like that. I'm going to say a word for justice. That's what they want you to do. Or else why would you have done it? Why do you want to do it? Whatever it is they want you to do, don't do it. Even if it apparently has something to do with rebellion. Even if it's to stand up and say, wait a minute, you're going to do that to me one too many times. Can't you just see those conspirators somewhere, if they had the time to even worry about you, to see somebody like you go, wait a minute, to holler out at the IRS. Don't keep sending me these letters. I'll pay you if I decide to. And they go, ha, ha, ha. What do you mean I've got to have it in by the 15th? You'll get it when I get darn good and ready to send it to you. That's what they want you to do. That's the only reason you would have said that. That's the only reason you would have done it. And it sounds as though this is some sort of resistance. Maybe not outright rebellion. And you're wrong. You don't understand the real nature of conspiracy. If they want you to do it, don't do it. Whatever it is. If you can jump real quick, there's a way in which you can see a more internal use of this kind of impersonal, personal. Feeling of us against them. The internal aspect would be, I'm going to rephrase the us against them. It then becomes us against I. There's the internal. Them against I. That doesn't sound familiar at all. Nobody can see any connection. There is always a feeling in everyone that it's us against them. And what I was trying to push you toward is you can get that feeling, and you can get some reflection of an enriched reality by seeing that it is us against them out there, that there is a four-dimensional reality to that, and there is a four-dimensional reality to the feeling of it's us against them in here. The way to try an approach to deal with it out there, to actually rebel against it, is don't do anything they want you to do. Never. And internally, is to start off and recognize that this us against them internally, and truth manifests itself in a feeling that is undiagnosed in this manner, that internally, individually, everyone feels like it's us against I, or it's them against I. How about me noting for you what would be the ultimate conspiratorial theory? The ultimate. At least for this week. No, the ultimate. Your own partnership. There would be the ultimate conspiracy. If you want it in more mundane terms, how about that which is accepted now almost worldwide by all reports? How about the division of man's consciousness into the conscious mind and the unconscious mind? It's just an accepted fact. You can't see the aspects of the ultimate classical conspiracy. And what the things I noted when I began tonight, the concealing of the conspirator's real interest, the misdirection of your attention, your, such as us against them, us's attention, the denial that there is a them. There ain't no them. It's me. Oh, I can see that some of the things I guess I do sometimes are not profitable. They upset me. I certainly don't do them consciously. That's not to say that unconsciously I still am not directed in ways that are not totally self-satisfying or profitable. You can't see that that could be defined as the ultimate conspiracy? That this band of conspirators, this band of people who in secret have plotted for common interest. I do not have to look to Zurich. I don't have to dream of Tibet. I got a fucking conspiracy in me. And it has all the earmarks of the classically externally defined conspiracy. It feeds me fragmented information. It makes me believe that I have a pluralistic source of information, that is, grasp of reality. I have freedom of choice. I can look at things in different ways. I can consider different opinions. I have such a variety of reports of reality that I cannot be easily fooled. I am sophisticated. I am a 20th century man or woman. I am intelligent. I am literate. I know what my own best interests are. I know what I need. I know what would be against my own best interest. And yet look at the way everyone says they feel. Look at the way that it's always been reported that everyone, from Bertrand Russell on down to Jimmy and Tammy Baker, think. Look down to the ways that you feel. And tell me that there is not the possibility of a conspiracy going on in you. You are driven to feel, think, and behave in ways that if you were intelligent enough, if you were clinical enough, and you could ask yourself as a fictitious, reasonably insane person, why did I do that? The answer is, I don't know. Have you ever done it before? And if your memory was good enough to begin to seam together a non-fragmented reality, you'd say yes. Do you think you'll ever do it again? At the rate I'm going, yes. And yet you say that it's not profitable, right? Can you even say right now that you want to? No. That's not a conspiracy. Something's going on. There are forces behind you, the actor. And you can't even say what the interests are. Whose interests are them? I don't know. Are they really yours? Evidently not. Well, whose are they? I don't know. Well, how often do you think about this? Never. There's other things going on. I never think about it. You mean you think about and behave in ways that keep you from ever even asking, what am I doing? Yeah? Well, times like this, I'm like you ask me, or I'm reading a book, and for 10 or 15 seconds, it's like just a little filler in a newspaper. And I'm turning between stories. It says something like, scientists believe that people don't really know themselves, neurologically speaking. And I read something like that, and I go, wow, that's true. And then I remember I was trying to finish that story on the NBA playoffs, and so I turned over to the other page. It has all of the earmarks of the external, classical, conspiratorial theories. That there are forces unseen that have plots, that have interest, that stay hidden from me. They misdirect my attention to the point that I can't even keep a continuing awareness of that. And then when it gets down to it, everything in life seems to be arranged to tell me that that's not true. But there seems to be the possibility of other information that might shed some light on it. But it's all fragmented. And it's all dead end, such as, all right, there may be forces at work that you don't know about, but they're all internal to you, and they're known as unconscious motivations. There are things that have happened to you accidentally. They can ultimately be solved if they were talked about enough, if you could look at them in the right way, if you could go back and sort of relive them, whatever the current thinking and therapy would be, that whatever is inside of a reasonable human being, a caring human being, these unconscious motivations that can be apparently self-defeating. They can be brought gradually, if not quickly, but they can at least gradually be brought more and more into consciousness and therefore controlled and dealt with, and you will be a freer human. There will be a kind of at least gradual revolution in your life. And it's not so. Except it apparently is true. By all feelings, by all sensation, almost across this planet now, what I've just said is incorrect. That I'm behind the times, or I'm just some kind of hard-nosed, I'm just real pissed off at the whole idea of Freud. I didn't think all that crap before he did, or for something. Because generally what I've just described to consciousness across this planet, almost in toto now, that is true. But is that not the ultimate, if we were talking about real conspirators, is that not the ultimate denial that they exist? They don't exist. They point out it's traumas you had. It's unconscious motivations in you. And you might be talking to one of the conspirators, and he'll say, hell, I got the same problem. I chew my nails all the time. I'm ashamed to go out, and I can't stop it. And you go, wow. A Rockefeller that bites his nails. A Guggenheim says, I don't know, sometimes I drink too much. Always have. And you go, wow, they're human too. We all have unconscious motivations, unconscious drives that make us do everything from the foolish, the unprofitable, to even the self-destructive. Is that not, if there were conspirators afoot, is that not the ultimate denial that they exist? To join right in and laugh along with you. That's a personal matter, and you've got the freedom to escape from it, to at least to improve your position, through analysis, through drugs, through perhaps exercise, through religion, through talking about it to your family, to your friends, to a trained healthcare professional. And there seems to be, you're right, if I had the time, if I had the money, if I had the desire, if I was a little more sick than I am, if I was a little more distressed, you're right. When it really gets down to it, the choice is there, the freedom is there. I could change, I could rebel. I mentioned last week, besides all this jumping back and forth between this invisible, non-existent crack between what appears to be out there and what I may be talking about inside, I also told you if you could see, and I'm inferring to you that this is a even in a 4D world, this is a two-directional street. If you can truly see that in the horizontal world, that is the three-dimensional world that in which we live, in which your ordinary consciousness, you and everyone else, is wired up, it is grounded, it is rooted, it cannot move from there, it is tied down, it will not fly any higher, it will not expand to any meaningful degree. If you can see that in that world, in truth, you've got to see it. See with a capital S, see in quotation marks. Now, of course, I mean something besides see. That in this world, there are the powerful in life's own system, and there are the powerless, and you all belong. You, and at least 97% of everybody else on this planet all the time, belong to the powerless horizontally, and you can't change it. You cannot move. If you can see that correctly, having nothing to do with economics, social strata, nothing to do with what you think it is, other than what you think it is a partial reflection of reality. If you can see that, it is a liberation that would probably give enough of you time to breathe that you might take a giant leap upward. That you are continually feeling as though you're trying to, not many of you heard this last week, there is a continual, at the partnership level, there is a continuing struggle going on and a judgmental struggle going on between you and your conception of everyone else. You are continually arguing at other people. Now, we've been through this enough. This is simple enough to know that the internal noise of the partnership, the running of the yellow systems itself, is continually talking about it. It's making fun of other people. It's being sarcastic just as fast as you can breathe. It's going on all the time. Attacking someone, laughing at them, why don't you straighten up, how could you be so dumb, etc. If you can see that in truth, it's the powerful in the ordinary world and the powerless, and you and the people you're laughing at are in the same category, and none of you, neither you nor the people you're laughing at, can move. It is a kind of liberation that I have talked about in all sorts of personal ways, but it is a liberation that indeed, from your viewpoint, and of course remember, everything's true from some view, from one view, that in some way you're obviously better off than this person. You may obviously have more money than they have. You may be in a better social position. You may be more educated to the point that you would not mispronounce words like they did, or that they would not say something dumb about trying to respond to a comment about current events and then place Iran and Northern Europe. You think, how dumb. How could somebody live and be like that? If you realize that there is a larger club, that there is a larger division into the powerful and the powerless, and you may know more geography than that person, you may have more education, you may have better taste in the arts, you may have some taste and they may have none. All that may be true from one view. It may be true from many horizontal views. But if you can one time grasp the fact, I may have more education, I may have more money saved right now than you'll make in the next 10 years, all of that. There are things about me that you'll never catch up with. When you get this awareness that be that as it may, you and I, Charlie, are in the same boat. And I got no more power over the horizontal world than you do. None. There is. The trompe-l'oeil. There is this illusion that seems true enough that I've got more power. You find out this person's illiterate. They could not write a letter to their congressman to complain against some pending piece of legislation if they kept up with it. If they heard they're going to raise the taxes specifically on sewer workers. And you find out this guy works in the sewer and he's illiterate. He doesn't know who his senator is. He don't know how many senators each state has. He's not even sure where Washington is. You think, well, even if he heard, if you stand up bar and they said, you realize they're going to pass a new tax next year just on us sewer workers? And he says, by God, I don't like it. Rebellion, freedom. He says, I don't like it. What can we do? And the bartender says, well, you guys at least ought to write your congressman. And he goes, what's a congressman? And you're sitting over there having a martini, a frozen daiquiri even. And you think, the man could not even write a letter. Whereas I have a secretary. I have the position in life. I can go. I know who my senators are. And I can go right now and write a letter. You think you're doing damn good? You're an idiot. Oh, now there's the illusion it does. And senators and congressmen tell you that it has an effect. They encourage you to write them. I take into account all these letters. The news reports that some senator over here actually changed his vote because of an overwhelming response of letters. Sometimes that gets reported once or twice a year. I guess it happens in the news. I remind you from last week, if it gets reported, if it's newsworthy, it's for one reason. It's newsworthy, because that ain't what happens. That is not the way life's arranged. You may have a degree. You may have a degree in education, law, medicine. You may be, apparently, a member of the community far removed in a far better and stronger position than the sewer worker. But if you think you've got any more power, once you see what I'm talking about, you are irreversibly powerless. You are done for. Because there is a conspiracy. It's just not as ordinary consciousness would have it. But part of that conspiracy is genetically, through heredity. The horizontal world is divided up into the powerful and the powerless, and it just apparently comes out in humans as being something of a social, political, economic affair. which is a poor reflection. It's a 3D reflection. It seems real enough, but that's not the conspiracy. But there is a liberation that once you can understand, you don't have to go down and shake hands with a sewer worker. You don't have to go over and buy him a beer. But once you understand, once you clearly see that I can suddenly be internally haughty, and apparently with good reason. I am literate. I bet if I tried hard enough, I could probably get in to see my congressman. I bet if I had several days to spare and enough phone calls. Now, I used to know a guy who was he was a county commissioner here, and I think he was even a secretary or something in the Republican Party here in this county. And in fact, he had a wife that was selling real estate, and my cousin looking for a house. And you start putting all this together, and you think, I could probably get somebody that might get me in if I was up in Washington. If I went there and spent a few days, I could probably get in and see my congressman in person or meet him in the hall. And that may be true. And it may also be horizontally true for you to think, that poor son of a gun. He couldn't even find his way to Washington. You understand what I'm saying. And you're sitting there, and as far as that view is concerned, it's true. There is a validity to that in the horizontal stratum of affairs. But there is a greater stratum, and it's a binary stratum. It's the powerful and the powerless. You're part of the powerless. So is he. So is the congressman. So is the senator, chances are. At least 93% chance to 1. You'll be surprised if you can find your way through all of this and don't choke over the next few weeks. And those of you who can remember that I'm not actually talking about what it may sound like I'm talking about sometimes, but there is a reality to what I'm telling you of the powerful and the powerless, and you are part of the powerless. And it can't change. There is no way you can change it. And there is no way that you're ever going to exercise what people dream of as being any, quote, power out here. There's not. And that's it. Me telling you that, as always, is not necessarily going to be any boon to you. But I keep stressing this tonight, and I mentioned last week, that there is a reality, a cutting reality to this, a liberating reality that has nothing to do with pessimism, fatalism. It's got nothing to do with a 3D world, because it's only there that fatalism and pessimism and even optimism, which is just a few people trying to, or apparently really adjusting themselves to the inevitable. It is only in the 3D world that there is any isms. How about what might appear to be a little more practical is our closing. How about the tattooed upon your arm for the week? How about every ill ain't death and every eye ain't you? That is not the kind of information that we get. That is not what ordinary fragmented consciousness tells one. Or, put it this way, can't you spell more conspiracy at work? I can't resist some variations. I thought maybe I would, but I'm not. Not only is not every ill death and every eye is not you, every bye ain't gone. And every eye is you. That's the first Brandenburg variation. See, the initial tattoo was every ill ain't death and every I ain't you, but the first variation is every by ain't gone and every I is you. Should I ever try and put myself in ordinary people's position and wonder, how is it to be stuck with any particular time with three-dimensional consciousness and hear any of this? I guess I'll never know. Well, shalom. But now you people in other cities got my message about using up all of your posters, handbills, advertising, and then to immediately never speak the glorious name Jan again. Don't use it in your ads. Don't use reference to any of those 4 books. And I told you that within several weeks I would give you the new shell, the new approach. But let me stress what I mentioned last week. You should work on the problem of coming up with something new. I'm not giving this to you as a task and saying to all you people, you got to send me some phony baloney, something that you came up with while sitting at Denny's at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking I was insisting on it and expecting to hear from you. It's all good attempts, if you knew how to rebel, was to first, again, realize how almost impossible it is under ordinary conditions to come up with something new. If I told you, you and other citizens even here, if I say, look, we're going to stop the Evotech, we're going to stop using my name, we're going to take all these books and deep six them, we're going to start with a Sub Rosa. We're going to start from scratch again, and we can't use anything that's ever been used before. And so come up with something, but I mean, it's got to be new, or I'm just going to close all this down, and I'm going to move back to Fort Myers. And I was serious. And let's assume that you wanted this to continue. And that's right, you got to come up with something new. Look how almost impossible it is to come up with anything new. I'm going into some of this. My plan in general is next week about rebellion and what new information entails, and how new information has to always be a threat, or it's not new, and it's not even information. But how? How can you find something new? Now at the horizontal level, at your own individual level of consciousness, when I've asked you people, come up with what would be a possible new idea that we could use. What would be the kind of shell that we might be able to use? Now I'm not laughing. Ha! Did I know plenty of you people did sit down and you drank coffee, trying to come up with an idea, and you wrote it down, and you came up with a name, an approach, and you handed it to me. All of you surely know in retrospect that it wasn't new. You never heard from me again. We didn't use it, but you ought to be able to see it wasn't new. It was hardly an idea. It certainly wasn't a new idea. But look how hard it is. It's not because you didn't try. It's not because you're brain damaged. Go sit down again under ordinary conditions and go, all right, I'm going to think of how could we do this new. All right, here I go. Where are you going to go? And yet, until you're pushed, the yellow systems and circuits seem to be just as free. Well, I'll come up with something new, by God. All right, give me over the weekend. How are you going to do it? You try and you think of the same crap over and over and over. You can rename the crap. You can shift part of the name of this crap over to this crap. You can try to put this crap together. You can try to cut it in two. and it still comes out baloney. And the kid says, I still say it's spinach, and to hell with it. See if you can come up with something new. What if I do decide it's got to be completely new, or we shut it down? And what if I can't come up with anything new? What if it's up to you? New. But new information is a strange notion. Unless I decide that too many of you are getting your carburetors flooded, the next time we meet, I'm going to go into aspects of what seems to be new information, what would seem to be the whole idea of getting new information, new ideas, something to actually feed a rebellion, something that would constitute some freedom of choice, that I am now partaking of pluralistic opportunities. I am now not being held by the reality of some conspiracy. Well, until I get around to perhaps helping you see some of it or pushing you somewhere, go again and sit down and go, use this as an example, a concrete example. How, what can you do in other cities? What can we do here? If I say just skip everything referring to me in the books I've written, anything we've done in the past, we're going to start from scratch, and it's getting later than ever. I'm older than the last time I told you let's do this. The time begins to press on us, and we got to find something new. This is not getting it. What will it be? Think of something new, damn it. It's got to be new. Take everything we've done, all variations of what we've done, and scratch them, because they hadn't worked. Or I'm telling you they haven't worked, or we'd be doing it. They weren't satisfying. They weren't satisfactory. They simply supported the status quo. We fell into the hands of the powerful. The powerful still prevailed. If there is a conspiracy, it's still conspiring. And it made us believe otherwise. We thought we'd get away with this. Didn't get away with anything. Didn't go anywhere. So now is the time, by God, for new ideas, right? Go have one. Have one. I won't tell anybody. Report to me if you want to. Of course, it's a real new idea. I really want you to. I want to hear it. And just think. Even though 1984 passed, the allegorical 1984 evidently didn't come to pass. We don't have Big Brother reading your mind yet, as far as you know. Not in the Orwellian sense. And so you can at least go home in the privacy of your own bathroom, bedroom, closet, den, and you can think anything you jolly well please, right? Then go to it. Nobody will know. All you who are laughing makes your nose kind of go, ooh. But there's the freedom to think. There's the freedom to conjure up, at least in possible terms, a new kind of reality. How else do people write books of fiction? Of course, I don't know. I never read any, but I always plan to as soon as I get through reading everything that's nonfiction. And then assuming that somebody can tell me the difference. Anyway, I know the difference in the library. The fiction books don't have numbers. They just have names. That's how I know the difference. And so obviously people can think new things. People can make up new ideas, new plots, new people, new characters, new possibilities, or else how does whatever it is, like 1,000, 2,000 works of fiction come out, I think just in America, every 2 weeks? And how is it you people can't come up with the same? How are you missing it? There are people out there, housewives, even men who are not housewives, who are writing books of fiction, and ask you for new ideas, and you go, why don't we start a church? Why don't we start a philosophical thing? Why don't we announce that we're in favor of this? I said new. How about something new? Some new thinking. That's what we need. New ideas, fresh ideas. We probably need them before it's too late, if it wasn't already. End of epilogue.